Visit licensureexams.com and try our samples completely free of charge. Hello and welcome to our Licensure Exams podcast. And today's episode, this is why passing your licensure exam might be hard for you. I'm your co-host, Stacy Frost, and I'm joined as always by my other co-host, Dr. Linton Hutchinson. How are you doing today, Linton?
I'm okay today, Stacy. Thanks for asking. I'm looking forward to diving into today's topic and maybe providing some insights and advice for therapists who have been struggling with their licensure exams.
Absolutely. Obtaining your therapy license is a major milestone and a gateway to beginning your professional career. But for many people, the licensure exam represents a daunting, anxiety-provoking hurdle. And today we want to explore some of the reasons why individuals might have a hard time passing these high-stakes tests.
Okay, Stacy. As you know, there's a number of factors that make licensure exams really challenging, from gaps of your basic knowledge to poor test-taking strategies. But one of the most pervasive issues that hold people back is test anxiety. Even though most students are prepared to take the exam and they're knowledgeable, they can be derailed by nerves and stress when that exam day happens.
And test anxiety is super common. And I think some test takers underestimate how much it might be impacting their performance. So I think it's important that we talk about what test anxiety is, the different ways that it can manifest, and then we'll provide some concrete coping techniques. What do you say, Linton?
Okay, let's do it. Test anxiety is a form of, you might think about it as performance anxiety. Stacy, do you get performance anxiety?
Well, I did, but then there was Wine Wednesday, and just kidding. After practice and practice and practice, I'm a little less impacted by performance anxiety.
Right. Basically, when you're in a situation where performance really counts, such as an exam, your body and minds can react with intense fear and worry. The anxieties cause the symptoms like a racing heart, sweating, shaking, nausea, and most important, difficulty concentrating and bringing back information.
Exactly. And these symptoms are, as you can imagine, part of the body's fight or flight or freeze response, which is triggered by the perception of a threat. And the problem is that while this response can be useful in actual dangerous situations, like, running from a mountain lion, it's not helpful during an exam. And the heightened arousal can interfere with your ability to think clearly and, as Linton said, recall information. But those physical stress responses can really throw you off your game when you're trying to focus on a complex exam. And it really becomes a vicious cycle. The more anxious you feel, the more your mind goes blank, which then amplifies the anxiety, and on it continues.
Precisely. Test anxiety has cognitive, behavioral, and emotional components that interact as that negative feedback loop. Worries and negative self-talk interfere with your ability to think clearly. The desire to escape the uncomfortable situation really makes it tempting to rush through the test or even to freeze up. And the guilt, embarrassment, and frustration over struggling with anxiety compounds all your emotional distress.
So we have this multifaceted problem of test anxiety that's very likely plaguing a significant portion of therapists who are seeking licensure. So Linton, why do some people experience this more intensely than others?
Now, there's a couple factors. Genetic predisposition is one. If you had a family history of anxiety, you may be more prone to experiencing it yourself. So past experiences also play a role. If you had a negative experience with tests in the past, you might develop a conditioned response to them. I think that most therapists can be particularly vulnerable to test anxiety for a few key reasons. First, the mental health professional tends to be highly self-aware and reflective in nature. While this is an asset in your clinical work, it can mean that you are more prone to rumination and getting stuck in cognitive distortions related to your performance and your abilities.
That makes a lot of sense. As exam day approaches, I've heard several test takers say that they find themselves constantly questioning whether they're really cut out for this field and whether they know enough to be an effective therapist. It's like their inner critic is in hyperdrive.
I think most of us can relate to that experience. It's sort of like the imposter syndrome is rampant among high-achieving professionals, such as therapists. But for therapists, there is an additional pressure at play. We work in a field where licensure and documentation of qualifications carry really heavy weight. There's an understandable fear that if you can't pass the exam, all of those years of education and training are down the drain.
Right. And all that pressure and the fear of failure can really be paralyzing, especially since, as much as we might intellectually know that a test score is not the ultimate measure of clinical competence, there's still so much writing on it in terms of your career and livelihood. And failing can mean delaying job prospects and additional financial burdens. Those exam fees can really start to add up.
Absolutely. The high-stakes nature of licensure exams is a major contributor to test anxiety, as is the often grueling study process leading up to taking the test. Aspiring therapists are usually juggling work responsibility, family obligation, and an intensive studies schedule. Sleep deprivation, inadequate self-care, and lack of social support can exacerbate all the stress levels that you might be feeling. And let's not forget the one that some people I know have.
Some people, Linton?
Perfectionism. Many therapists are driven individuals with high standards for themselves and others. While this can be a strength, it can also contribute to anxiety, right?
Yes, that is very true. Very true. Now, all of these factors converge to create this perfect storm of anxiety come exam day. Even the most competent, well-prepared individuals can find themselves overwhelmed by panic. So the question becomes, how do we help people overcome test anxiety and show up as their best selves when it matters the most? There are a number of proven strategies that can make a real difference. And a good place to start is by first normalizing test anxiety and reframing it as a common, surmountable challenge. So often people feel really alone in their struggle, like there's something wrong with them if they can't simply push through the nerves.
If you stop and think and reframe the test like this, you've already started taking the test right now. You are in the exam at this particular moment. You're here listening to the podcast, and that's part of the exam process. So you are already taking that exam. So another effective strategy is to practice relaxation techniques, deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and grounding exercises can help calm your body and mind at the same time. The techniques can be practiced regularly and actually during the exam to help manage anxiety in the moment.
And one of my favorite grounding techniques is the 5-4-3-2-1 exercise.
What's that?
And it's where you look around the room and you name 5 things that you can see. You close your eyes and identify 4 things that you can hear. Name 3 things you can feel, like the ground beneath your feet, your clothes, etc. 2 things you can smell. That one's a little tricky. And 1 thing you can taste. So like maybe if you're really anxious, there's probably some weird, like for me, like sometimes it gets like a metallic taste. So
Yeah.
Anyway, I really like that one. I think it helps me focus when I'm thinking about things in a really structured way like that. 5 things you can see, 4 ththings you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can smell, 1 that you can taste. So, Linton, do you have any favorite relaxation techniques?
Yeah, I like students to practice breath awareness meditation in the weeks leading up to the test, starting with just a few minutes a day and building up your tolerance. You can use the anxious energy as a reminder to check in with your breath. Am I breathing? Almost like an alarm bell, cueing you to come back to your center.
Ah, that's a good one. So you're basically conditioning a relaxation response to the anxiety triggers.
Right.
So it really becomes an adaptive coping mechanism.
Yeah, I like students to practice breath awareness meditation in the weeks leading up to the test, starting with just a few minutes a day and building up your tolerance. You can use the anxious energy as a reminder to check in with your breath. Am I breathing? Almost like an alarm bell, cueing you to come back to your center.
Ah, that's a good one. So you're basically conditioning a relaxation response to the anxiety triggers.
Right.
So it really becomes an adaptive coping mechanism. Oh, Linton, you behaviorist, you. Next thing you know, you'll be training people to fetch your BOGO sushi from Publix as a reward for every deep breath they take.
That's good. Let's see if it works, Stacy. Okay, just imagine the aisles of Publix filled with relaxful, mindful shoppers, all taking deep breaths and loading up their carts with sushi. Maybe we should start a new trend: Zen shopping.
There you go, folks. A trademark is born.